Hello children, welcome back to the class and we shall discuss a few questions which will be frequently asked in the public examination and the topic is respiration. And in the previous class we dealt with the questions related to nutrition. So now we are going to deal with the topic respiration. So what are the questions that will be frequently asked in the public examination? Okay. So how breakdown of glucose takes place in different ways in respiration. So process of respiration means the oxidation of food materials. So which food materials get oxidized during the process of respiration means carbohydrates and fats. Carbohydrates, simplest form of carbohydrates is glucose, and fats, simplest form is fatty acids. So they get oxidized during the process of respiration. So how? So in different ways. What are the different ways? So when there is a sufficient amount of oxygen availability and in higher organisms, a process of oxidation of food material that is called respiration will take place, which is called as aerobic respiration. And when there is insufficient oxygen or no oxygen, especially in lower organisms, what happens? The process of respiration takes place in the absence or insufficient amount of oxygen, that is called anaerobic respiration. And there is another way of oxidation of food materials, especially in the muscle cells. So if we do vigorous exercise, we feel pain in the muscles. Why? Because during vigorous exercise, muscle cells do not get sufficient amount of oxygen. Under those conditions, they get the insufficient amount of oxygen, and due to which lactic acid. So anaerobic, they undergo anaerobic respiration, due to which lactic acid is produced. So the more amount of production of lactic acid, the more amount of pain in the muscle cells. Okay, and so we breakdown of glucose will take place in two steps: in aerobic respiration or anaerobic respiration. So first step is glycolysis. So glycolysis means glyco means glucose. This means breakdown. One glucose molecule will break down into two molecules of pyruvic acid. So it takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. And whereas in aerobic respiration, glycolysis is followed by Krebs cycle, which takes place in mitochondria, and more amount of energy is generated in mitochondria due to oxidation of food materials. That is why mitochondria are called powerhouses of the cell. And in the case of anaerobic respiration, what happens? The incomplete oxidation of food materials will take place, due to which ethyl alcohol is produced. So that is in the case of anaerobic respiration, which takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell in lower organisms. So in lower organisms, there are no mitochondria are present, and the process of fermentation, that means oxidation of food material, in the absence of oxygen, fermentation will take place, due to which alcohol is produced. So that is anaerobic respiration. And in the muscle cells, what happens? Due to when there is not sufficient oxygen is supplied to the muscle cells, they undergo anaerobic respiration and produce lactic acid. So in this way, we can see breakdown of glucose will take place in three different ways. In the presence of oxygen, aerobic respiration, that is carbon dioxide, water, and energy is produced. So I have given equations for aerobic respiration and also anaerobic respirations. And in anaerobic respiration, which takes place in the very lower organisms, the end products are ethyl alcohol, carbon dioxide, and comparatively less amount of energy is produced. And in the muscle cells, lactic acid is produced. So that is three different ways. Okay, next, that is aerobic respiration. Glycolysis is followed by Krebs cycle, and anaerobic respiration, glycolysis is followed by fermentation, and third one, in the muscle cells, when there is insufficient supply of oxygen, lactic acid is produced. So that is three different ways of respiration. Next, what is energy currency in the cell? ATP, adenosine triphosphate. ATP is the energy currency of the cell. How? So ATP, when it breaks down, when ATP breaks down into ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and inorganic phosphate, lot of energy is released. So that is why energy currency vessel is ATP. Okay. Next, how much energy is released when ATP breaks down? So when one molecule of ATP breaks down into ADP, and that means here you have to remember that chemical bonds are broken down. When chemical bonds are broken down, what happens? Energy is released. So 30.5 kilojoules per mole of energy is released. When, or it can otherwise say 7,200 calories of energy is released. So how much of energy is released when ATP breaks down? ATP breaks down into ADP and inorganic phosphate, and this much of energy is released. Next, why fish continuously open and closes its mouth? So in fishes, what happens? The respiratory organs are gills. So when the fish opens its mouth, it is aquatic organism, lives in water. So when the fish opens its mouth, the water containing dissolved oxygen enters into the body of the fish, and then it enters into the gills. Gills are richly supplied with blood vessels. So when the water flows over the gills, so the exchange of gases will take place. That means the gills will take in the blood vessels which are present in gills, take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide, and so the water containing carbon dioxide is released out. So that is why when fish continuously, why it opens and closes its mouth means it is related to the process of respiration. So when it opens its mouth, dissolved oxygen enters into its body, and dissolved carbon dioxide is released out. So that is, when it opens its mouth, water enters it. Again, exchange of gases will take place, and then when it opens, again water containing dissolved carbon dioxide is released out. So that is why the fish continuously opens and closes its mouth. It is related to the process of respiration. What is the path of air in human respiratory system? So how the air enters into the respiratory system of man? So first you can say nostrils, a pair of openings which are called nostrils, which are provided with a small hair which prevent the entry of dust particles, and the entire respiratory system is lined with mucous membrane, so that the air will get into our body. That means nostrils open into nasal cavities which are lined with the mucous membrane, and this mucous membrane keeps inner surface always moist, and the air gets adjusted to the body temperature. Then it passes through pharynx. Pharynx is a muscular organ. It is common path for food and air. So from the pharynx through a small slit-like opening, a small opening which is called as a glottis, the air passes through larynx. So pharynx, from the pharynx, the path varies, divides. That means deviates. That means air passes from pharynx to larynx through a small opening which is called as a glottis. So glottis is covered by a small flap-like structure which is called as epiglottis. Okay, so this epiglottis prevents the entry of food particles into the larynx. Okay, so from the larynx, the air passes through trachea, and from the trachea, the two branches are formed. They are called bronchi. These bronchi enter into lungs, and the bronchi will further divide into so many minute branches which are called as bronchioles. These bronchioles will enter into the alveoli. Alveoli are called units of lungs. So these alveoli are richly supplied with blood vessels, and here the alveoli, they take in oxygen. Exchange of gases will take place by means of diffusion, and the air is exchanged, and now the air containing carbon dioxide passes through bronchiole, from the alveoli, bronchioles, bronchi, trachea, larynx and pharynx, nasal cavities and nostrils. The air containing carbon dioxide is sent out of the body. So that is how the path of air: nasal cavities, nostrils, nasal cavities, pharynx, through glottis, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and in the lungs, alveoli. So this is the path of air in the human respiratory system. What is the common name for larynx and trachea? The common name for larynx is voice box. Why? Because it contains vocal cords, and these vocal cords are responsible for producing sounds. That is why larynx commonly called as a voice box, and trachea is called as a windpipe. So it is a tube-like structure, and commonly it is called as a windpipe. And how trachea is supported by from collapsing. So trachea, I have already told you, it's a tube-like structure, and so if there is no support, it will collapse. So, but how collapsing is prevented means trachea are supported by cartilaginous rings. Cartilaginous rings support trachea. Cartilaginous rings support trachea from collapsing. Okay. And what are the ill effects of consuming tobacco? So tobacco, if it is consumed in the form of cigars, cigarettes, bidi, gutka, all these are very harmful to the health. That means they may cause various diseases. That means respiratory problems and oral cancer, and lungs will get affected, and so it may lead to cancer also. So that is why the consumption of tobacco is always not at all advisable. So that is why so many people suffer with different kinds of respiratory problem due to consumption of trachea, consumption of tobacco. So that is why it is always not at all advisable to consume tobacco. Okay, various diseases, respiratory tract will get affected, and it may lead to oral cancer, also lung cancer, and so many respiratory problems, asthma, so many problems, not asthma, that means so many cancers, and so many oral cancer and lung cancer, etc. Next, what are the roles of ribs and diaphragm in the process of respiration? So, what are the roles? Means ribs are the skeletal structures which form the thoracic cavity. These ribs form a cage-like structure, and diaphragm is a plate-like structure which is present below the lungs. And during inhalation, so respiration contains two steps: inspiration or inhalation, expiration or exhalation. So during inspiration, what happens? The diaphragm moves down, and the ribs will they that means they increase the volume of thoracic cavity, and so the lungs will expand, and the air enters in, and in the alveoli exchange of gases will take place. And after exchange of gases, next step of respiration, which is called as expiration or exhalation, will take place, during which diaphragm gets back to normal position, and ribs come back to normal position, and volume of thoracic cavity gets reduced, and the lungs contract, and the air from the lungs is pushed out, and now the air containing carbon dioxide passes through from alveoli, bronchioles, bronchi, like that, trachea, larynx, pharynx, nasal cavities, and nostrils. So that is the roles of respiration. Vertebral column, they help in the process of inhalation and exhalation, increasing and decreasing the volume of thoracic cavity. Okay, next. In the lungs, where and by which process exchange of gases takes place. So in the lungs, the exchange of gases takes place in the alveoli. Alveoli are the units of lungs, and exchange of gases will take place by means of diffusion. Diffusion is the process by means of which exchange of gases will take place. Where means alveoli, and which process means diffusion. And what are the similarities between aerobic and anaerobic respiration? What are the similarities? That means first thing, both the processes, aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration, will take place in the living organisms. Glycolysis is common for both the processes. In both the processes, carbon dioxide is released. In both the processes, oxidation of food materials will take place. Okay, and energy is released in both the processes. So these are the similarities. So you have to remember both the process will take place in the living organisms. Carbon dioxide is the end product. Energy is released in both the processes. Oxidation of food material will take place in both the processes. Glycolysis is common in both the processes. So these are the similarities, common points in aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. And what are the differences between differences? So you have to find out what are the similarities. Similarities means common points. Differences means what makes aerobic respiration different from anaerobic respiration. So that we shall see. Aerobic respiration will take place in the presence of oxygen. Anaerobic respiration takes place when there is insufficient amount of oxygen or no oxygen. And next thing, in aerobic respiration, glycolysis is followed by Krebs cycle, and in anaerobic respiration, glycolysis is followed by fermentation. And next thing, in aerobic respiration, the end products are water and carbon dioxide. In anaerobic respiration, the end products are ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. And next thing, more amount of energy is released in aerobic respiration, less amount of energy is released in anaerobic respiration. That is next one, in aerobic respiration, complete oxidation of food material will take place, and in anaerobic respiration, incomplete oxidation of food material will take place. So, and in aerobic respiration takes place in higher organisms, whereas anaerobic respiration takes place in lower organisms like bacteria and fungi. So we can give an example for aerobic respiration: man, frog, anything, monkey, cow, anything. Anaerobic respiration, yeast, bacteria, we can give the various types of bacteria. Anaerobic respiration will take place. So these are so don't get confused. Similarities means common points in aerobic and anaerobic respiration, and differences between aerobic and anaerobic respirations. So there are a few more questions in association with the respiration. We shall deal with those questions in the next class. So hope you have understood, and you have to give the answer in a proper way. And so I have given explanation, and finally the answers you have to give. That means I have explained and I have given the answers. By the end of the answer, I have given the points. You have to note it down and you have to give the answers. Hope you have understood. So if you have any doubts, please let me know. Okay. Thank you.